Welcome back to the Business of Laravel podcast, where I talk to business leaders who are working in and with Laravel. So my guest today is Jason McCreary, the wonderful human being who is also happening to be the founder of Laravel Shift. And Jason's been around, JMac, has been around the Laravel community since early days and has been helping us kind of like build up tooling to kind of like help Laravel developers and companies that use Laravel. And I'm supposed to not give the intro at all and just hand it off to you. So I'm going to hand it off to you. Could you just kind of tell us who are you and kind of what's your business and what's your business's relationship to Laravel?
Sure. Yeah, I am JMac. I think most of the community probably knows me as JMac, but Jason McCreary is the full name.
It's your government.
Yeah, and I've been, gosh, it was funny when I was at LaraCon the other week and listening to Taylor on stage, with his announcements, and he was talking about how Laravel, is 14 years old or whatever. And I was thinking, oh my God, Shift is almost 10 years old. So, I mean, I've been around for a while in the community. Yeah. And Shift started really early. In fact, it started December of 2015. So it's 9 full years. I mean, it's almost 10 years, but it started in December. So it's kind of one of those like fun off by one, got to start at zero, mind-bendy date math things. But anyway, the point is, been around for a long time. It's just, it's been interesting to be in the community, but in a way in the last year or two, especially in becoming a dad, like I feel a little more like OG in the community.
Absolutely.
Feel a little bit off my lawn every now and then, little boomer, little zoomer going on. So it's funny, but you'll hear me talk about things like that, especially in relation to Shift, like follow the conventions, don't fight the framework, all these kind of things, and then of course the standard stuff of like, format your code and write tests and all the things, like eat your vegetables,
Exactly. Get off my lawn,
So, yeah, I feel that way sometimes, but I'm okay with that, I think.
Old man yelling at cloud. So if somebody has never heard of Laravel Shift before, can you kind of tell us, like, what does it do? And, give me, I know you've given the origin story in longer scale, but can you give us kind of the compressed version of it?
Absolutely. So Shift is an automation tool for upgrading between Laravel versions. That's kind of its bread and butter. So if you want to go from Laravel 10 to Laravel 11, you can run the Laravel 11 Shift. And that one specifically, it's going to do all the, obvious stuff that it needs to do, like convert, eloquent model attributes for cast to the method, things of that nature. But it's also really going to go, these days it goes above and beyond the upgrade guide. And in fact, Laravel 11 specifically, the upgrade guide, doesn't really outline how to slim your application. But it's entirely possible to do so, and I think a lot of developers want the slim structure. That's something that's very awesome in Laravel 11, and I think will continue to be present in future versions. So if you want all of that automation, if you want all of that upgrade, make your Laravel 10 app feel like Laravel 11, like it was always written in Laravel 11. It's not old, it's not legacy, it's not crusty in any way. It's all modern. That's where Shift comes in. It automates all of that stuff for you for what I feel, and we can talk about it more, but what I feel is a very low price.
It's a very low price. As a consumer of Shift, I will tell you it's a very low price.
Yeah.
And just for the non-programmers in the audience, I want to share a little bit of context for what Jason just told us. So what he's saying is basically the bare minimum that Shift and an upgrade guide could do is say, as long as you make these, let's say, 6 changes, when you update your dependency of Laravel from Laravel 10 to Laravel 11, your app will keep working. So that's kind of the bare minimum. But when he was talking about the slim framework, one of the things that's happened historically is that you can make the upgrade and it functions, but it's still structured like the old app, the old versions, the old way of doing things in a lot of ways, because Laravel is very permissive and it allows you to have Laravel apps that are structured in a lot of different ways that still work. So the bare minimum and what the upgrade guide usually says is, here's how to keep it working. But what you're kind of saying is that Shift doesn't just keep it working, it actually makes more changes than are absolutely necessary in order for this app to stay new feeling as long as possible. Does that sound like a good kind of description of what you're saying?
Exactly. And that's important because, your developers, as a developer, you're going to get into the docs, right? And the docs are going to show you how to do things in the Laravel 11 new, latest, greatest way. And if you've left parts of your application in the Laravel 10 way or the Laravel 9 way or whatever version you're coming from, it's just going to be a jarring experience. Like, it's not going to be very efficient over time. Can you do it? Sure. But Shift's goal is to really, again, make it feel like your app has always been running that latest version. So there's no technical debt, right? You're upgraded, it's ready to go, it's looking fresh and clean, and you focus on the stuff you need to be focusing on, like building features, not manually upgrading these mundane things, right? Not copying, pasting code and bumping composer hell dependencies. Hopefully I can help avoid all that with Shift. That's the goal. And the genesis, I think, of that is like, I've been a PHP developer for 25 years now, and I've jumped around a lot of the communities. WordPress is kind of the ready example. And when sites and projects are not upgraded, you can get on stage and you can talk about all these latest and greatest things, but if your community is not using those things, there's a drag that gets created, and that drag, I think, over time can kill a community. I think if you look at, Magento or even other frameworks, other things in PHP, probably one of the reasons they didn't stay as successful for as long as maybe something like Laravel has and continues to do is because of that freshness. So if Shift in a small way helps with that, that is honestly one of kind of the founding premises of it, is just like, I didn't want the drag of maintenance. I knew that from working at agencies on WordPress stuff, on cake PHP projects. I mean, we would spend weeks upgrading stuff, and they weren't always, honestly, sometimes they weren't like billable hours in a way. Like, it was tough, or it was just slog work, right?
Yes.
And
nobody likes it. Nobody wants to pay for it. It has to happen.
Exactly. It has to happen. We're not going to work on a project that's, Laravel 2. So you kind of have to do it. And so you end up making affordances for that to happen, or compromises. And I remember doing that. I remember upgrading like 10 apps, and that's kind of the genesis of Shift. It was, in a way, truly born out of the fact that, like, I don't want this to be a drag. And so if it can help the community at large to do that, then that's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, as somebody who I see hundreds of code bases, Laravel code bases, maybe thousands at this point, I can say that allowing the thing to get out of date is probably one of the most easily, predictably, preventably solved, significant issues that were brought in to fix for people. Like, there's probably like the top 5, but most of the top 5 are pretty complicated. They have to do with your process and your engineering and your understanding, yada, yada, yada. But this one is easy. It's just like, just keep it up to date. And if you keep it up to date, even if you don't use Shift, if you just keep them up to date when it's time to keeping it up to date, and also follow programming practices. Jason mentioned some of them earlier, like, hey, follow the conventions, stuff like that, to allow it to be easy to keep up to date. It's one of those, like, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, a shift every 6 months, keeps the miserable 5-week long upgrade process where everything breaks away, and Shift is my preferred tool, for sure, as an agency owner and also as someone who maintains some products. But even if not, you got to find some way to keep it up to date, because it's going to burn you in the end.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's really interesting is that you have created one of the successful software as a services that target Laravel developers. And when I introduce this kind of like podcast at the top, I say, working in and with Laravel. And a lot of folks have a business that uses Laravel to target non-Laravel people. And of course, Laravel developers love the idea of targeting other Laravel developers because we know each other and it's easy to scratch your own itch. But not a lot of people have found the level of success that I think that they want to have the people they look up to, right? You've got, Taylor, and you've got Beyond Code, and but there's a surprisingly small amount of people who have found long-term, this can become my full-time job, financial success from because there's only so much space, right? So I was curious for you, what are the unique elements of what it's like having a thing built in code that is targeting coders versus a thing built in code that is targeting doctors or real estate agents or whatever? Is there something unique in pros or cons of that experience?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, but going back just a second to something else, I'm really glad that you said is we are in a community of giants, right? Like, I mean, like you said, look at Taylor and Laravel itself specifically. Like, I remember a couple years ago, Taylor having a podcast of like $10 million in 10 years or something. And of course now, again, coming off these recent announcements, 57 million, in series funding. It's like huge stuff, and so you, like you said, you feel in a way, even I do sometimes still like, gosh, look at all these, huge successful people, and I don't put myself in that category very readily or very often. And I do think Shift has had its success, but it is easy sometimes, when you're building something to kind of look always grass is greener in a way of like the stuff. So it can be a slog. And I think getting to your question though is like building for developers explicitly, I think has been like so great for me again for kind of my goal and premise of Shift itself, like a tool for developers to help developers like with the crappy work, right? Like, targeting Laravel specifically has been the most successful for me. And it's been kind of interesting. I've actually tried to break into other frameworks. I've tried to break into Rails. I've tried to break into Python. Tailwind, is even a small subset of the market. PHP at large, I tried to break into at one point, and it's never really worked out for those. And there might be a couple reasons, but I truly believe Laravel is a bit of a hotbed in a way for SaaS, because when you first come into the community as a developer, I think you're immediately introduced in a way to paid services. Laracast is the ready example, right? You're immediately, hey, $9 and subscribe for this infinite amount of like Netflix style content on Laravel and the community. $9. I mean, it's a total value, but you're presented with something paid right away. Whereas if you look at PHP at large, you're not. I mean, gosh, there's free web hosting at some places for PHP. You're not used to paying for anything. Yeah. And so I think one aspect of Laravel specifically is I think the community's willingness to open their wallet for something that they find valuable. Yeah. And an underlying premise of that is also valuing their time. They want, a lot of developers don't value their time. I can do that. My time's free in a way is in their mind, and it's not. Your time is not free, people. Your time is actually your most precious asset. You'll never have any more of it. Yeah. So to me, time is the most precious thing. So anything that gives me a leg up or maximizes my time, is totally valuable for me. But also, too, being developers, I think specifically is nice because I've gotten wonderful feedback. Shift would not be what it is without the feedback from developers. If I just immediately sold this to businesses or other large entities or built it for something specific in that way, I honestly don't think it would have reached its level of success. Those developers getting in there is a double-edged sword. On one hand, they're kind of willing to accept that it has some bugs. Yeah. And on the flip side of that, they're ready to tell you about it. And most of them tell you about it, and most will tell you about it in a positive way. Now, of course, you get the angry coders sometimes that are like, this is blah, 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 and they want to tell you how to do it right. Yeah. And I just roll with those emails. But again, 99 out of 100 are like, hey, it did a great job. There was just this really small thing that it missed over here. Yeah. And not actually been so small, but they're pretty cool about it. And they even, they give me a code snippet or they'll give me access to their repo. And I've been able to incrementally improve it because of that feedback. And in a way, it's almost, I don't want to say artificial intelligence because that's, it's not at all that. And it's such a buzzword now, but like, it is very much collective intelligence. The community has helped improve Shift. The more people that use it, the better it gets in a way. And it's because of that developer feedback. I think if my audience were someone else, a business, it probably either would have been a lot more gripey or not more successful, right?
And I love that idea about folks valuing their time, because I know that one of the early ideas that kind of came up was, if we as a consultancy can get, let's say we can charge a client 2 weeks to do an upgrade, or we can charge them, less than $50 to just run Shift, sure. It benefits them, but it doesn't actually benefit us, right? Because we're now not using that time. And then it's like, but what is the best for the client, which is clearly to use Shift? And then do we believe that there is opportunity for us elsewhere? And the answer is yes. So we're like, great, let's do what's best for the client. And I think that one of the things that allows Laravel and the folks in Laravel to value our time is the knowledge that Laravel is a desirable enough thing, and our skills are at as wanted and needed enough that we don't have to balk at the idea of paying a service to take rote work off of our plates. If that rote work was our only way to get paid, then we may not be willing to pay for it. But if that rote work is the stuff we don't want to do, so we can instead do the meaningful, significant stuff, which seems to be very much the case in the Laravel world, then Shift isn't a competition to us getting good work. It's actually allowing us to get good work,
Yeah, focus in on the stuff that matters. I mean, I think that'd be an easy spin to say, okay, we need to get you upgraded, but here's this value package line item for that, and let's stay focused on the good work, right?
Yep.
That's maybe even the higher dollar amount too. So I could see that working out. Yeah, but to that point, like even Laravel itself is about developer ergonomics, about developer speed, right? Even it is about time and happiness and developer experience. Like the new Laravel Cloud coming out, deploy in under a minute, right? It's all about, everything comes back in my mind to time and so having something that fits that is important to me.
Yeah. So if somebody coming along was like, what I really want is I want to be the next JMac. And I know that you said you'll always put yourself up there at the top, but the reality is you have built a company with a tool that you like working on and a community you enjoy, and you're able to provide for your family doing it, which is a dream, right? So if somebody wanted to be the next JMac, do you have any advice to give? I mean, a lot of people have tried to come up with developer-targeted software as a service, and some of them have been successful, and a lot of them haven't. Do you have any tips to give?
I do have some tips. I will preface though that I am very much open and on the side of founders that will kind of absolve themselves by saying luck. I'm not afraid to use the word luck. I think when you repeat something 3-4 times, fine, you don't have to say the word luck anymore. And there's plenty of people out there that have had repeat success. Those are successful people. Again, I look up to them. But I will freely admit I feel I'm a bit lucky, and I'm a bit lucky again for all the reasons I just mentioned: the placement, the timing, where I was in life, how I built it, meeting Taylor at the conference. Again, if you want the full origin story of Shift, check out the Base Code podcast. I recorded a final season exactly of that, the origin story. So check that out. But from the business side, I will disclaim initially that I do think luck very much had a role to play in it. But the two things I will say that I do think, one, you can't look for overnight success. I have struggled with that with Shift over the years, and I've made those mistakes in other projects or other areas of my life where I tried to look for the quick win, the quick success. It's typically not that, right? Like that's not what success looks like. Again, I'm in the 9th year of Shift, and it's still around. It's awesome. It's had growth all along the ways, but it did not start as $1 million project. That's not at all where it started. The power of compounding has been on my side, but that is not at all where it has started. And then the second bit of advice is kind of already too something else I said buried in there. Listen to your users. Like if you can get feedback from your users, you need to get that and get as much of that as you can early on and roll with it. Doesn't mean you have to listen to everyone. Doesn't even mean, in my opinion, you have to be nice necessarily to everyone. But you need to try to objectively, you could get an email and be like, gosh, this guy's being a jerk. But you should still try to objectively look at what they're saying and see if there's something in there that can improve the direction that you're heading, just to tweak it slightly. You shouldn't change your direction entirely based off one email. But you should always listen to your users in the sense of getting feedback in the direction in which you're heading, to just dial in that degree, one way or the other. I feel like that is huge. You can't just blindly go into a cave and build something for 6 months and pop it out the door and think that it's going to be successful. There's all sorts of other things you have to do. I'm no marketing expert. I'm not going to talk about those things, but I do think a hack, in my opinion, in something like a SaaS is to get it out there early and listen to feedback. I mean, literally, I remember Jeffrey Way, like my 11th user, the 11th run of Shift. And he sent me an email. Jeffrey Way, big in the community at the time, 9 years ago, Laracast, Jeffrey Way. And he sent me a reply and he said, yeah, it was pretty buggy. Like, I think as an early, and he was right. It was buggy. He was right. There's nothing wrong with what he said. But to get an email like that from that level of someone in the community could have really hurt, right? It could have really hurt. But, again, I tried to stay objective. I let that pass over me, and I looked at what he said was buggy. And he was right. There were things Jeffrey Way was doing. Back then, he's trying everything. He's got repositories. He's got custom namespaces. He's got all sorts of craziness in his app, and I didn't cover those bases at that time. I didn't honor those, and I worked with him. Hey, can you send me this code? What was buggy? Expand, right? Tell me more. And I created a dialogue, and I've done that with probably thousands of users at this point. And again, that's why I talk about that collective intelligence, and I will attribute, if anything, I will attribute Shift success to it is that it is my unwavering crusade to answer all support emails that come into Shift.
I love it. And I've been on the receiving end for quite a few of those answers, and it is always, you say, getting an email from Jeffrey Way is a big deal, and Jeffrey Way is a huge deal. But also, it's to the point where sending an email back and getting an immediate response from JBack is also a pretty big deal. So I just want you to hear that, people can get very excited to be like, oh, the man who made this is directly handling my customer support response. This is great.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I tend not to try to inflate myself by any means, but it is funny. Every now and then I'll get an email and it talks about, the Shift team, or I was just talking to someone on the Shift team. I do every now, and normally I let it slide, but every now and then I'm kind of like, oh, no worries, there's no team, it's just me. And then I'll get a reply and it blows their mind, because they're like, wait, this is just you? Oh my God, this is amazing. And they're even more impressed. So it is fun. I don't think about the other side, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. And that does take me into a direction where I want to go in terms of a little bit of talking about life as a solo founder. And one question I want to ask you before we kind of move into the next section there is, being the solo founder and being the primary person who maintains it, do you take vacation?
Oh yeah. We just... How? I don't know. I guess we get on a plane and we go somewhere. I don't know. I guess we.
Do you answer customer support emails?
Oh,
do you have to drop everything? Okay, so
I'm never.
Could you take a vacation without a laptop?
No.
Okay.
No. I'll admit that freely. Now, if some listeners are technical and they do happen to watch any of my live streams, I appreciate the three of you that do that. I do have my phone, and I actually have an SMS admin from my phone, so I can text. Things that will help me kind of mitigate some of that support. As I kind of am traveling or doing something. So I have Shift where I can message Shift
and tell it to do
send
things.
It commands that are common support requests, so I can I don't have to always break out the laptop is the point. But
That's
am I always
cool.
on support? Absolutely, yes.
Just a side note, would you consider ever making a YouTube video for how I take vacations as a solo founder? Because I know they're in streams, but as someone who did streaming a lot, it's hard to pull the pieces out of a stream. I feel like a 5-minute video where you're as a solo founder, I built a chatbot in my app so that I can take vacation. I feel like there's something interesting there. I don't know. Just think about it.
Sure. It actually was kind of my number. I did the post several years ago when I actually first made it. And I was using Nexmo. It was a bit of a tangent, but I was using Nexmo at the time. And out of nowhere, I got a box from them. And they were like, thank you for making this. They sent me a hoodie and a laptop case. And they sent me a bunch of swag. And I never even thought of again, that side of it. But yeah, I wrote some kind of Dev2 article way back, 5 years ago when I first built it. We'll make sure we link
that then. So
sure. And in my recent video, I actually added, for those that technically interested, I actually added a new command to that based on some stuff that I was having trouble with during Laracon. So I added another command to it. But yeah,
that's
maybe
fun.
I'll make that video. That's true. But kind of trying to answer your question, I am always on support. And again, I don't mind because it gives me insight into my users. I try to do that first thing in the morning. Nowadays after the girls are up, I'll just tell my wife, hey, let me punch through these emails, 15 minutes. And, I'll normally do double duty. I'll clean up while I'm answering, something with the kids. And then I'll get on again during their nap and then again at night. So 3 times a day, basically, I answer emails. And to your point a minute ago, sometimes if you hit me in one of those windows, you're going to get an email 10 seconds later, which blows people's mind.
Yeah.
But even if not, maybe you're not getting an email for, 10 or 12 hours. But I pride myself on that support. So I do that. Do I have to do that? No. But I do. But as far as Shift itself, like the work, there's typically not a lot of maintenance work because it is, at the end of the day, very much a seasonal business, right? It's around the seasons of the Laravel release, typically in Q1. And so Q1's incredibly busy, and then following it with marketing and update and tweaks and just being relevant. And then, of course, I like to speak, not necessarily about Shift, but just stay involved in the community. So I do a lot, but it is a seasonal business. So right now, it's not too crazy. And so most of our vacations are later in the year. I would not take a vacation in March, for example.
Yeah. Okay. And it's so funny because I knew it's seasonal, and I never thought of it that way, that like it's sort of like, lawn care or something like that. There's a time of the year where everybody wants it, and there's a time it still needs to keep running the other times of the year, but there's not, 90% of your use is all within a 2 months period or something like that.
Yeah. I'm like the opposite of a teacher. I'm like 3 months on and 9 months off.
Not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad when you phrase it that way. Is that the reality? No. Again, I'm answering support every day. But yes, from a 9 to 5 work perspective, I'm more on that category than every day. So
got it. So let's talk a little bit more about being a solo founder. I know you're a big finance guy, and we talked a little bit about like what does the finances look like. And so I'm curious for you, as you've established your personal finances, your business finances, and all that kind of stuff. What kind of things have you discovered, and what's bitten you, and kind of what's that experience been like for you as a solo founder?
Yeah, I think it's been really good, especially probably in like 2018. 2018, I think, is when I went full time on Shift. So about 6 years ago. And even at that time, technically speaking, it was a pay cut to leave. I had a contract with Papa John's. It was a huge contract. And I kind of took a pay cut based on Shift. Now, of course, the next year, again, with the growth of Shift, it was okay. I kind of could forecast and say, okay, well, I've got a runway here. It's very safe. We didn't have kids at the time. And so, there was a lot of flexibility for me to try. If I was going to do it, I was going to do it then. And it's worked out since then. But the point there is that I was in a place where once it surpassed a day job salary, there was money that was coming in that, like, in a way, it's awesome. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with this money? This wasn't necessarily life-changing money at the time, but it started to be more than what I could make at a day job, or what I was making at a day job.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went down this path as someone who likes investing. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm great at it. I've definitely lost my fair share of money in the stock market, but I've also had some winners. And I know the power of money. Let's say I know what it can afford you in life, right? It's just the world in which we live in. If we didn't live in that world, I would be a lumberjack probably. But we live in that world, so I try to game it, right? If you can. And so when that money was coming in, I went down this path of like, okay, well, how do I do this from a tax thing? Because as a solo founder, maybe you're just an LLC or something, and you're bringing that money in all yourself. Or if you're doing that, you're maybe not getting the tax breaks as a business. So step one for me was to figure out what kind of tax classification as a solo founder is best for me.
Yeah.
And what I found at the time, and I think this may still be the case now, of course, not financial advice, talk to your accountant, yada, yada, all that stuff. Right. But for me, a Type S Corp worked best, right? I wasn't passing the money through to me as LLC. I was actually having it as a corporation, if you will, effectively. It's being taxed at a corporate tax rate. And then the remainder, the profit of the business, is what became passed through. So this affords you a lot of stuff. It affords you like better depreciation if you go and buy a computer or an iMac or a company car or whatever you do, travel, business expense. A lot of things start to become more readily deductible in that tax classification. So I would definitely kind of check out tax classification, I think, is kind of the first level I went to, right? So that one may be pretty obvious. I think for then, in the coming years, it was like, okay, well, I'm not getting a 401k anymore. How do I do a 401k, right? So started looking at this, and everybody's like, oh, get an SEP or all these acronyms and stuff.
Yeah.
Those actually aren't the best. You can put more money
Okay.
away, they have what is called a solo or an individual 401k.
Okay.
I think they call it a uni 401k. It's as sole founders or sole operators of a business, and technically your spouse can be included. You can read all this on the IRS website. But yeah, the solo 401k, you can actually put more money away there than you can just a simple retirement plan, an SEP plan,
Okay.
I think. I don't know the exact numbers this year because they kind of increase every year, but let's just say the SEP at the time, I think I could put in like 20 a year, 20K a year. Whereas the 401k, you can put in like 55. So almost 2.5 times more.
All right. Love it.
And again, these are all business things, so it's money that I don't touch, but of course it's money that's still mine. And by not touch means I don't go and pay taxes unnecessarily on personal income, right?
Yeah.
That's being passed through to me as a profit. So it became this thing where it's like the more and more, how much money from the business can I squirrel away so I don't have to pay taxes on it? And this is just the game of being a solo founder, I think. And it's one that, again, I've become kind of interested in the process of making mistakes over the years. So there's other stuff. I don't want to geek out too much. We'll take it where you want to take it. But, these are some things that I kind of discovered early on little loopholes. Not loopholes. It's all legal. It's not a loophole. It's just.
And I wanted to go there, because we've all heard these stories of the big billionaire business owners who are dodging taxes. And sometimes I talk to some of my friends who don't own businesses. They're like, so when I hear you talking about trying to minimize your tax burden, it sounds to me like you're trying to run away from paying taxes. And so I want to clarify for anyone who's not familiar with that, what we're talking about here is there are ways taxes are supposed to be allocated and also avoided within legal frameworks and parameters in the United States, but not everybody knows about them.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know about those, you're paying more than you're supposed to. Now, there are also ways to illegally and unethically trying to avoid taxes, but that's not what we're talking about. It's this whole middle world of knowing what things are available to you. So like things like 401ks and IRAs are, for example, retirement vehicles where if you put your money towards retirement, you're going to pay less taxes on it. Corporation type S is because a lot of founders have to pay their taxes twice if their business isn't organized right. The business pays taxes on the money, and then the founder pays money on those taxes when they get paid. You're getting double taxed. So an S corp allows you to minimize the amount of double taxation that you're happening. So it's all like, it's not avoiding what you should be doing. It is understanding that there's options available that you don't get unless you learn about it and take advantage of it, right? Exactly.
Yeah. I think if you're just getting started, then fire up the LLC for the legal protection and go from there. But if you search for any of this stuff, you're going to get retargeted ads on all your platforms of people saying, oh, if you make over 100K, do this. And it does become true at some level. Again, if you're starting to make more than the day job or something, you should probably look into some of these things because they can help you, set up the correct tax classification for yourself. And then that starts to open doors to more things that are now allowed. I can't do those things if I'm not a type S corp, right? I can't start to get into these things. I can't do these things if I'm not a solo founder. If I have employees, well, I'm probably a type C corporation right now, right? Like I don't know those things. I'm not that. But like that's a whole different classification, a whole different set of rules. And even at that level, you have different things that you can kind of look into there. So, but yeah, they're just things I've tried to figure out over the years. Because when you're paying like a 40% self-employment tax, like that's not right. That's not what it was. That's not how the system was set up. That's fine if you make extra cash mowing a lawn, okay, but not fine when you make more than a day job at a business. That's a legitimate business. It should be set up as a legitimate tax corp business. And and now have those opportunities. So that solo 401k was probably a big one. I picked up on that like 2 or 3 years ago. Because there were, I think, what was it? It was probably 2021. I won't get into the exact numbers, but in April, I didn't know some of these things. And of course, in April, I go to do my personal taxes, and I'm still in TurboTax. I go to do my personal taxes. And like legit, the number didn't even fit in the little box where they say how much you owe. It was like They had to, I mean, it was tiny in there. It was tiny.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, what is this? So,
Yeah.
you know, you want to get this set up right. You want to get it set up right.
Well, and when people go off and start their own business, I think there's very seldom a full understanding of what are the things that A, come along with starting a business, but B, the things that are going to happen no matter what, but your job used to be taking that for you.
Exactly.
And one of the first ones, and this is not what happened to you, but one of the first things is your job was withholding taxes from you. And for the folks outside the United States, sorry, this is a very US focused one, but your job is withholding taxes from you. If you're a freelancer or you have your own thing, you need to figure out what tax bracket you're going to be in. And the best way to do it is to get an accountant. Get an accountant who's responsible for your relationship with your taxes and ask them the question of how much should I set aside from every paycheck? And they're probably going to give you a number that's somewhere between 20 and 50%. And they're going to say for every single paycheck, take that money out and put it in a bank account. And you're either going to pay it at the end of the year or you're going to pay it quarterly. But either way, it's not 2%. It's not 5%. It is going to be a large chunk.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Shift had a good growth year, actually. You know, coming out of COVID, you know, people going back to the office, people getting back up to date. It had a good year, and yeah, old J-Mac was so naive, and the numbers went up.
Look at all this money.
I paid nothing. I was like Scrooge McDuck. It's like swimming in dollar bills.
God.
And then the IRS came along and said, "Yeah, we're going to take all that and then some."
Yep.
For your naivete. So,
Oof,
but yeah, so the next year, I got. Then I really knuckled down, and so I did all the estimated stuff, to your point. So this last year, you know, starting to get to levels with growth, you know, 9 years into Shift, that I said, okay, well, how can I take this farther than the solo 401k? So the next level beyond a solo 401k is a defined benefit plan. Have you heard of this one?
Mm-mm.
So a defined benefit plan is, again, only available to solo founders. So sorry to, again, keep segmenting the audience. But if you're a solo founder in the US and you have a business that's doing well and you've kind of checked some of these other boxes, you should look into this. The defined benefit plan, according to the IRS, again, there's a lot of calculation that goes into this based on your age and how much the business actually makes and how much you pay yourself. There's all these little variables, and we should talk about how much you pay yourself too here in a minute, because that's something else I kind of dialed in. But for the defined benefit plan, the IRS allows you to put a large sum of money, I'm talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars, away to a retirement plan. Mm-hmm. Now, there's two things about this plan that are nice. First, it's a defined benefit plan, meaning that it's capped. It can only make like 6% a year. You're capped. Okay. Now, in the current economic climate, making 6% is pretty effing easy because you just go buy a T-bill from the government that's guaranteed by the United States to give you 6%. Yeah. So you're set. And you're not talking about small numbers because, again, you're able to put, you know, $100,000 into this plan. So every year you're making in this retirement plan at least $6,000 doing nothing. Yeah. The other part, this is the really interesting part, because 6% might not sound that awesome when the market's up 20% in a year. But 6% is still something. You're beating inflation currently. Yeah. The second part that's awesome is it's a business expense. So I just lowered the overall liability income of my business that I pay myself at the end of the year. So basically what I'm trying to do with that, what I try to do with the defined benefit plan is maximize that calculus now. That's my new game. Mm-hmm. Maximize the calculus of the defined benefit plan. How much can I defer for taxes? Because I'm in a good place. I don't necessarily need all of the money coming in from Shift right now. Yeah. But I might like that when I'm old and not doing Shift anymore. Yeah. So, you know, because you got to think of that as a solo founder. You got to think about that. I'm not going to, even if I might code forever, I'm not going to probably have Shift forever. Like, there is a lifespan to this business. Yeah. So, you know, having that money for retirement, again, as a job, a day job, you don't have to think about that. They give you a match and they give you all these cool little programs because that's what they can do as an employer. And hopefully you're set by the time you're done. But as a solo founder, if you don't squirrel away some of this money, you better keep on working or just have an awesome exit or something. So the defined benefit plan is awesome because then effectively I'm almost bringing no money in at the end of the year. So I have no tax in April, according to the IRS, more or less. But I've still given myself a good paycheck, and I've put tons of money away for retirement.
Mm-hmm. And what I want to kind of set a framework for it, and then let's talk about how you decide how much to pay yourself. For those who aren't familiar, you aren't taxed by the amount of money that comes into your company. You're taxed based on the amount of money that comes in with the amount of money that was spent, basically subtracted from it. So it's basically you're trying to be taxed on your profit, not on the revenue. So one of the things that a good lawyer or a good accountant does at the end of the year is says, well, what are the things that we can write off? A lot of people have heard about write-offs but don't fully understand what it means. And a write-off is basically a qualified expense that the business made that can be extracted, like subtracted from the amount of revenue that the business made. And the goal is basically you put all the income in one column and you put all the qualified expense in the other column, and you hope they sum out to zero or a negative number, because then you don't pay taxes. And the taxes, again, this is not cheating. This is not manipulating. This is literally how taxes are supposed to work. The only money that you're supposed to be taxed on is the money that comes basically effectively out of the business to be seen as profit, or that the business puts in their savings, whatever. Basically anything the business has outside of its operating costs. So the way it's relevant to the one you just said is you said putting this money in this retirement plan is actually a qualified business expense. And so that kind of diminishes your likely taxable income at the end of the year. That's big brain. So but can you tell a little bit about, because I'm assuming it touches in the same calculus, how do you then define what your salary is in the first place?
Yeah, so I think my accountant for the state of Kentucky, and again, this probably varies state by state, but for the state of Kentucky, he basically said you need to be within 10% of your profits is kind of a calculus, or you have to be able to say, like, what is a reasonable salary for someone that does what
doing
you do.
What you do. Yeah.
That's kind of another one. So I think those are kind of like the 2 bullet points. I think as long as you're kind of like above 10%, you don't really hit any red flags. And then also if you can say, oh, well, this person over here is a programmer and they make, 55 in Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
That's hard to do as Shift becomes, bigger and more unique, right?
Yeah.
In the beginning, maybe that was easy. I just said, oh, I'm a programmer and I write this software. Right. But it's beyond that now. So I kind of follow the 10% rule now. So every year I kind of tick up. But I did increase that to help the calculus. Now it's about increasing it to help the calculus of the defined benefit plan. So at first it's kind of like a balance of paying yourself enough so you can take in the money, because that is also a game, right? You don't want any flags from the IRS. You want to do it right, but no more right than you have to.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So if I got it right, then I want the rest of the money to go into my pocket as, basically, like you said, profit. Because if you pay yourself everything, if you pay every dollar that you make in your solo run business as a paycheck, you're paying into Social Security, your, county taxes, everything, all up and down the scale. You're paying all into that when you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that if you take the money home at the end of the year, because basically it's a qualified business income and it's taxed as that separately. That's a percentage that's varied as well, but you're paying federal and state. That's it. You're not paying Social Security. You're not paying Medicare. You're not paying your fire department. Like, they take it out of the paycheck. That's what they get. So again, you're doing more than you need to and that's nice. They'll thank you for it, I guess. Probably not, but they'll take it. They'll take it and never say anything. Yeah. So you kind of just...
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you kind of want to be in a place where you're not getting any letters from any official organization saying you owe, because you're never going to get a letter that says, oh, here's a little money back.
Too much, yeah. Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar, and I guess I'm the context guy here, when you own a company and you also work in the company day to day, whether it's a solo founder or you've got 20 employees, you are compensated at least 2 ways. You're compensated for the work that you do by your salary, and then you're also compensated potentially, if the company is profitable, by owner draw, or basically just like money that comes to the company that you and any other owners of the company can choose to either keep in the company as savings or take home because your ownership, pays you out for that. If there's a company profit share, that is that owner draw really just basically like it's the money that the company has over at the end of the year. What happens with that money? Does that money go into savings? Does it go just to owners? Does it go out to the employees? Whatever it is, it's not a part of anybody's salary. And so as an owner, you always have to make this decision of like, what's my baseline salary, above which any extra income that comes to the company will not come to me as an increase in salary. It will come in as this concept of owner draw. And when you have a full team like I do, it's a lot easier just because there's so many financial reasons why it makes sense for me to get paid exactly what I should get paid as if I were not an owner of the company. There's a million reasons why it's much simpler that way. But to your point, as a solo founder, it's sort of like your pay relative to somebody else's pay is just sort of if there were not government restrictions and government reasons for you to do it, there'd be no reason for you not to take the entire thing as owner draw and take a salary of 1 cent. But you are trying to line up with the ethical and legal guidelines of what the IRS wants you to do, which is, hey, what's reasonable for you to get paid? Pay that amount, and that's it. And some people just take the full thing as salary, and they're getting overtaxed. So it's good to have that note.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think I'm in a place where I dial it in to reflect Shift's overall revenue growth as a company, but then also dial it in because, again, some of the percentages start to matter if you dig into it and look at kind of the IRS for the solo 401k or the defined benefit plan or a profit sharing plan, all these different plans that are available to you as a solo founder. They say things like 20% of salary, or so if your salary's higher, then you can put them way more. So, the calculus changes then. But yeah, if you're just starting out, as you go through these levels that I've kind of briefed over, do check these things out, especially as a solo founder. The final hack I'll mention real briefly that I'm getting into now as a kind of a newer parent is, of course, even as a solo founder, you can technically employ your spouse, and then your children as well. And there's stipulations on what those are and what those have to be. And of course, you can't just say, I can't just say my wife Ashley. I can't just say, Ashley works for me. There has to be something legitimate that she does. So, this year we've discussed her kind of rolling into that umbrella. And so she does certain, tracking and analysis for me because she's good at that. And that's what she did at her own previous job. So, I'll hand her this data set and she jumps in Tableau and makes these things and helps me figure out what's being run the most, what's not being run. So I know kind of where to attribute my time. So as long as there's something that, my daughter, she's in my pinned picture on Twitter. Because we had this little copy paste, T-shirts on, like a little geek thing, and I was excited. My wife got us those when she was born, so that's on there. So that counts. That's marketing. That counts. They're kids. They don't have to. It's not like get over here and program. She's a kid, so there's not as much to do as a child as maybe your spouse. But the point is you can hire them, you can pay them, and now they have access to all of these things I mentioned: retirement, defined benefit, profit sharing. You can put up to $18,000, I think, for your child completely untaxed per year. So, hey, that's a nice savings account for them someday, year over year over year. I mean, by the time they're 18, that's good money. Yeah. So, you don't have to get crazy and set up these trusts and look into these survivorship things you hear about in San Francisco or some of these bigger podcasts. I'm not there. I understand why they're doing that, but I don't need I don't need to set up a trust for my business per se. It's not that big. But I think I'm in that in-between land where it's clearly not a hobby. So I've kind of had to go through these things, but it's not so large that I'm hiring people or taking funding like maybe, you or Laravel team or anything like that. So
yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing all this. Yeah, because I've never been at the size that you're at right now. And so I usually follow most of the stuff and can translate it. But this last section here about hiring the kids, that is completely... I've never been at the size of company where that's something I can do. So I have to go kind of look up, go learn about that. And if I find any good resources, I'll share them in the show notes as well. So
yeah, they're all in the IRS website is normally where I look. And then I kind of have a little bit of information I can go and ping my accountant. But I like to try to find the reference. So that's how they speak. And so I can say it's just like giving somebody a line in a code or an error message, right? It didn't work. Well, that doesn't help me for shit. Please send me the stack trace. You know what I mean? So I can speak their language. I send them the IRS. Hey, I saw this page. Does this apply to me?
Subsection 241A, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. So that's really cool. Yeah, again, I've never heard of any of the things you're saying right there. So I'm going to have to go learn, and you've taught me something. So
yeah. I did a thread on Twitter maybe last fall. I'll dig it up for the show notes where I kind of mention my journey through some of these things, but it got a lot of discussion, some on both sides. Business savings accounts is another one I didn't mention. I just kind of got into, you can earn interest on your business funds over the year. Don't just let it sit and earn, especially in the current economic climate. Don't Don't let 100K sit in your bank account from January to December doing nothing.
And turn it into 95K after inflation, functionally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could make it 110K if it's invested in a proper business savings account. And sure, you're going to pay a little bit of money on that. So you could argue it's negligible, but hell, it's still something. Buy yourself a beer at the end of the year for free. You know what I mean? I don't care. It's money's money. Like,
I love
I'll
that.
take it.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, I'm bummed because I want to keep talking. I got to wrap because I got a meeting right after this. But I have one question that I ask everybody at the end, and it's a money question. So I want to ask you that money question, which is, if somebody came along and said, Shift is the future, here's $100 million, give me the code base and walk away, what do you do tomorrow?
Done. Where do I sign?
Yeah, but what are you going to do? Let's say you sign tonight.
What do I do?
What do you do tomorrow morning?
Well, I'll say two quick things on that. It's funny because at LaraCon, I had like 12 different people ask me pre-Taylor's talk, like, "Oh, are you going to sell Shift, or is Laravel going to buy Shift?" Even Wathen asked me if Taylor had made an offer on Shift. Now, I don't know if he was kidding or not, but it was just like, it's just funny timing that like everyone kind of mentioned that. So I will say there's no formal offers or anything like that on the table. I'm probably small potatoes to Laravel. They got so many other things doing, and again, I'd like to think I'm a value add to the community. There's no reason to like take me out as a purchase, but
for sure.
But yeah, anyway, I do think that if someone did come along for the right multiple and so forth, maybe I would sell, and I would probably do woodworking more than I do currently, which isn't a lot with the girls anymore. So I would definitely do more woodworking during the day. I still I have that like creator bit, I think, in me. I wouldn't say I'm super creative, but I have that creator, like, sharing, teacher-esque thing in me, I think. I like learning, I guess, is the bottom line. And if I can do that with other people, or I can share that with other people, I'm probably going to be happy doing that. So I think I would maybe, like, teach more at a high school, or maybe I'd try to do, like, something more in the community locally, right? Like, on that level, like guest lecture at the high school programming class, or I don't know, something. I would try to find those things, I think, if I just really, truly did not have to worry about money and squirreling it away from the IRS. I would just chill and do that. And probably fly private every now and then. That sounds really cool. Haven't done that yet, but I think I'll probably try to do that someday.
I have one friend who does it, and it is an entirely different world than
it looks
I'm
cool. I'm right next to like a private airport, actually, and I see them after the Kentucky Derby just all day long in their jets, just zoo, 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 and I'm like, that looks pretty sweet.
You know, I thought your answer was going to be woodworking and hanging out with the kids, but I didn't think about any of that stuff with the teaching. It's really fun. I mean, obviously, you're a great teacher.
Hanging out with the kids is a given, but I will admit that the thing I love about Shift, and the thing I'm probably most grateful for, you know, of course, the community and its success and everything like that, but we kind of mentioned pre-call, but the flexibility it has afforded me, the jokes aside, on like the opposite of the teacher schedule, like the fact that I can, after this, go pick up the girls from daycare and do all that stuff, that I think is proven lately to have become the ultimate treat, you know, of the ultimate success in my mind of Shift. Like, I love the community impact. I love my part in all that. But, you know, it's something I don't see, but I definitely get to experience, is that, I get to be around the girls. So I don't think that would increase with the buyout per se. So that's why I'm just disclaiming in case my wife ever listens. That's why I didn't mention that. I love the children. I love them.
We all know. You talk about them all the time. We know you love them.
So,
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, I love a podcast with a friend, but I especially love podcasts when I learn things. So thank you for teaching me things. Thank you for sharing all the stuff that you know with everybody. And, you know, this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Thanks for Shift, man. The amount of wasted, rote, you know, coding, banging head on the desk time you've saved me alone, let alone the rest of the community, very grateful for you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, sometimes as a solo founder, it can be isolating. And so to hear those things, you know, it does help. Maybe not in the moment, but it gets reminded, you know, to kind of keep slogging sometimes when you're on something. So it's awesome.
We're very grateful for you. So for everybody else, thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you have any questions, I'm sure we'll have JMac's Twitter handle and any other ways to contact him in the show notes. And we'll see you all next time.